Hello and welcome to another episode of India Risk Report. And in this episode, we are looking at data privacy risks in India, particularly in the light of the fact that there are many cases which have begun to come to light about data being passed on, which the actual holder of the data or the possessor of the data should not be doing so without the consent of those who they have acquired the data from. And in India, there is a great deal of resentment and a certain amount of criticism of the fact that there is the legislative framework that exists for data privacy is not strong enough. And even if the legislative framework does exist, there is room for people to go around it. And the scandals that of late, which has done the rounds internationally, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, in which information of over 80 million US citizens was apparently and allegedly passed on to assist with election results. At the same time, in India, there is the concern that medical information is being passed on, as well as a certain amount of retail information provided by innocent buyers in the shopping markets and malls is now being communicated, which carries risks to citizens which we are probably not aware when we pass on the data. And therefore, the key issue is that how do we define the foundations of the next set of digital practices that would be at the heart of data protection. And we have three experts on this show, quite unusually, who are very well informed about these issues, and they will have their own positions on the subject. We have with us Mr. Nirupam Lodha from Luthra and Luthra Law Offices. We have Mr. Vinay Godse, who is Vice President for Data Security Council of India, a NASSCOM initiative. And we have Mr. Suman Jyoti Khaitan, who is the Managing Partner of Suman Khaitan and Company. Gentlemen, welcome onto the show. My first question to you, Mr. Khaitan, is what really is of concern is that what are the salient features of the proposed data protection framework in India, and what changes remain to be seen?
Well, actually, when you talk of data protection, the law is one side. The more important side is the technical side. So whatever law is passed would be a one step forward. But even this one step forward is, in my opinion, grossly inadequate, because there's no way where you can check whether what the law provides is actually being carried on technically by the people who are supposed to do it. And who will check it? You're proposing to have a regulatory body, but what would be the standards of those regulatory body? That, of course, is another very big question mark. And you also see the extensive collection points of data. Each and every consumer, each and every person who has a mobile phone, each and every person who goes online is giving you data. Is the regulator up to this task? I am very sorry to say that this legislation does not even contemplate it. It just provides a kind of a framework for doing it. Okay. And considering our kind of a legal framework, I'm not sure whether this is enough.
Okay, I think that's very strongly put together. And Mr. Lodha, I take the legal argument forward before I go to the corporate issue. Now, what I need to understand from you, why is there a reluctance on the part of the government to take in legal inputs when you form a law? Now, I'll give you an example. The cyber security template that was laid out by the government in terms of cybersecurity protection and laws immediately had resentment in the industry because the corporates were not taken on board. Right. So it was just assuming that just because government wants to make its own cyber network safe, it is only creating a kind of set of rules which applies to, you know, like the Official Secret Act and various other things, which applies to only government employees who sign it. But today, data, information, all this is so easily available. It's trans-global. You can access my information sitting in the United States, which American companies do in any case, of all the, at least those who work for American companies. So why is there a reluctance to get legal inputs on the part of the government?
To be fair to the Justice Sri Krishna Committee, which has come up with this data protection bill, they did first issue a white paper and invite comments on it. The surprising part was that proposing a bill was not within their mandate, but they went ahead and did it. The government has also invited now certain comments from the public.
So you are saying that what Mr. Khaitan has said, that you're not on board with what he's saying?
What I'm trying to say here is that the government has invited comments. I agree on one point with Mr. Khaitan clearly, is that the bill in its current form is not something which I would personally be happy with as the data protection law of this country. There are a lot of areas which need ironing, but this is a good first step. This provides you with the framework, and I'm very, very hopeful that with the comments coming in from the industry now, September 30th being the deadline by which the industry needs to provide their comments, the lacunas in the bill and the various areas of the bill which need addressing would be addressed, including the local saving of a copy, serving copy here, and the various vagueness in the bill will go away, and I'm hopeful towards that.
Okay, so do you agree, Mr. Godse? Because my understanding is that the industry has already raised several concerns about the localization of data, amongst other issues, and there is not enough progress to address those concerns, and September 30th is not far away.
Yeah, so being a part of this committee, CEO, DSA was a part of this committee, and there's a formal dissent note that we put together to counter some 2-3 areas basically. So one part is definitely localization of data, and it's a kind of a sweeping thirst on localization of data, where it talks about different categories of data and it talks about different norms for localization of the data. So that is one part. Secondly, there is definitely the type of the information which you qualify as sensitive information. So there is an observation from our side in terms of what information needs to be qualified as sensitive information on the backdrop of the kind of innovation, artificial intelligence, machine learning kind of innovation that we see in this country. So we feel that some set of data may not qualify to be part of sensitive personal information. And there is another area where we have dissented is criminal liabilities on the part of the organization for because there are a lot of obligations and liability which has been imposed on organizations for governance of the privacy in this country, and on the top of that it's also gone for the criminal liability in this.
Mr. Khaitan, it is said that the Indian legislator did amend the Information Technology Act of 2000, and that included section 43 and 72A, which gives the right to compensation for improper disclosure of personal information. So isn't that reasonably a step in the right direction? I know it is not as stringent as EU legislations which have been imposed, which are perhaps, I'm told, the strictest in the world.
Look, the way I am looking at it, in India the difference is, that's why I criticize the act, you are looking at it only as a breach of individual data. So an individual who has a right to privacy, who doesn't want his individual information to be leaked, has a right to sue and claim damages. That's the only perspective of this act. That is what I am saying is the shortcoming of this act. In the future, as China has realized, America has realized long ago, even Russia has realized, your national security and the national security concerns of a nation and the people as a whole will be determined on the basis of these data. It is not for any other reason why China has banned Facebook and Google and they started their own version of Facebook, Google in China. You see, the data collection is going to be your real armor for the future. This is something which the bill does not even address. Perhaps the government has not looked into it. India, if you really want data security, not merely as somebody just stole my privacy, that's a very small aspect. If you want a larger picture, this bill does not go, the legislature has not even contemplated it. Now, as far as your damages are concerned, you know how a system works, you know how the consumer courts function. Sometimes you get damages, you have to go and prove it, you stand in line, your damages will come after 5 years, 10 years, but the damage would be done. The question is not whether I get damages for leak. The question is if you have accessed my private data and if you have been able to use it for whatever commercial or other purpose. Can you stop that? You can stop it only if you have the technical know-how. Otherwise, in law, you can only give me damages, but you cannot prevent that wrong.
Okay, so Mr. Lodha, now these are some very strong issues, but I think there is also another element to it that goes with this whole thing, is that do we have enough skilled people to enforce the government's mandate? Because India is one of the world's biggest market when it comes to use of software and software related things.
That's a very, very important fair point you make, Mr. Raza. We do lack skilled people because what the bill also does is require auditors who do audit data protection mechanisms which are put in place by corporates, etc. Do we really have that talent right now? No, I don't believe so. We do need some years of training and some years of educating not only the auditors but also people who will implement this, because there's going to be a suo motu authority which will be looking at all these actions, and they'll also be deciding that when a breach notification comes to them, which is the breach notification which should be informed to the data principals and which are those which are fine to not be informed but acted upon. So these are important aspects of privacy which the officers sitting in that authority would be deciding. Surely we need training, we need much more. I think the education system, the legal system also needs to get trained towards. It's like any other law which comes into force. And it's connected to the point you just mentioned of Section 43A of the IT Act. The enforcement under Section 43A was so minimal. It was for very, very small kind of affairs like a fraud transaction on an ATM kind of thing.
Right. I think we are all on the same page there, that what we really need to do is go beyond the stated brief, and most importantly, there needs to be a recognition at all levels that India is a huge software-centric market where we, in fact, earlier figures have shown that more than 33% of Indian users of phones and all other software happily pass on their information without cross-checking who's asking for it. But more about what are the challenges, what can be done, how the industry looks at it, and how India can make its citizens and its data more secure. But that after a break. Welcome back. We are looking at data protection and data security, and there are many issues, both legal and the challenges that the industry faces and the corporate sector faces. And I'm going to ask you, Mr. Godse, because you've not been given that much of time in the earlier segment, that the industry has raised some serious concerns. It is also a matter that data protection that is provided not just to industry, but let's also look at individual users. You know, the people are running small and medium enterprises. They don't count as big industries. But data protection has to be something that I think we need to create a greater sense of security amongst our own citizens, that any data that we pass on could be an impediment to national security. So how do you, as an industry body representative, look at it? That do you separate industry, as in chimneys and smoke and everything else, from individuals who may be small startups today, but tomorrow could be a dream story like WhatsApp is?
Yeah, so that is what the entire debate that we see from the industry side is. So this subject of privacy has so many different connotations, right? So and the entire digitization innovation plan now hinges on a ability to use data, right? And that's what at one point in time and others part of the overall ecosystem that we see in India. So there is a lot of thirst that even government is trying to say that the organization should share data. There should be national artificial intelligence policy document which Niti Aayog has been floated. And when we look at entire the innovation ecosystem which is going and the value that get created in a digital or internet economy, so it's last to deal with the use of data and availability of that data basically. And then when you're trying to bring a data protection regime in this country, you need to look at the different kind of quarters and see how this particular legislative framework will impact them. For example, if I am putting something specific restrictive way of using of data, it's very easy for a large corporate organization to obey and comply with that because they have resources to comply with them. But then it will create a lot of entry barriers for the startup ecosystem. It will also significantly enhance the bottom line because they have to invest significantly on a compliance side of it. So, some of the capital we already had been seeing in a product economy in this country, the capital is not that abundantly available in the country, and now the capital will be also going in terms of compliances, in terms of this kind of rising costs because of some of those policies that we are thinking in terms of data protection regulation.
Oh, good. So, obviously you're taking everybody's concerns in mind, but there is another legal dimension to it. Mr. Khaitan sir, of the 29 data breach incidents in India last year, identity thefts accounted for 58%. So, it's very clear that data that is being stolen is looking at identities, and with that there is the possibility of ransom being demanded from individuals. There is the possibility of business being enhanced at the cost of somebody else, such as medical data being taken and then other VIPs being held to ransom about medical secrets that they have, or medical firms enhance what to sell and what not to sell. So, there are a lot of issues, and the biggest challenge I feel is, can you really legally put a terminology or a framework within which you can identify the unidentifiable, because data breaches are often done by those who are difficult to identify.
You see, I'm glad you have asked this question. If you see the large number of population in our country, especially those who are, say, less well off, it's very easy to steal their data and identity and to use it for any nefarious purposes you want. For example, if you want to show that you have a party of, say, 1 million, you can do it. If you want to support a movement and you say I have a support of 10 million people, you can easily copy their data. And something far more serious. You can also do it to falsely implicate somebody in a crime. That's one of the objections in Aadhaar card. When you have a biometric evidence with you, fingerprints, eyeballs, somebody can steal it, put it in the place of a crime or in the police records, and then you can have a very grave danger for all this. And it can be used to manipulate everything from across the border to cross border activities and a whole lot.
But we've been told again and again that Aadhaar card is very, very secure.
But didn't it leak last year?
Well, some media reports did bring out.
And what about the promise by Assange that he can breach it anytime he wants to?
Right. So it's Assange versus.
No, I mean, but he has known. But he has known to have. Are we more secure than America? If Cambridge Analytica could influence America, Russia, other places, is it our stand that we are far more secure?
How does a legal provision make the Aadhaar secure?
That's what I'm saying. Legal provision cannot make it secure, because for your security you need technical support, and you need a strong.
And there is an absence of skill.
Number one, and the persons who monitor or control the technical support, they must also be people of the highest integrity.
Right.
If they themselves set it off, then what do you do?
Okay. So, Mr. Lodha, there is a cottage industry now that has come about because of the various data protection initiatives that are there. So, you are having lawyers who advise compliance measures, there are cybersecurity consultants, there are software developers, there are a whole lot of people who've got onto this. And this is not going to slow down, it's only going to become bigger and bigger. So, how do you battle through all this maze and swim up from the bottom of it all to the top to say, come to me, I'll give you genuine advice and I'm not going to be a fly-by-night operator?
That's the job we do day in, day out as lawyers, because there are so many law firms and lawyers here. But it is the trust that the clients repose in you, and it's the quality of advice that you provide. And we've already been advising a lot of clients on the erstwhile laws, that is under the IT Act, as well as the data protection bill on the white paper. And we maintain that the quality advice that we provide will mitigate their risks and will help them comply with the laws of this country. And I hope to continue that.
Okay. So, Mr. Godse, there is another element to it all, and that is non-state actors.
Yeah.
You know, I asked this question to Mr. Khaitan also, that how do you pin them down, how do you punish it? The Honorable Supreme Court has noted that Uber has no real vehicles of its own, maybe a handful. Facebook creates no content, it just gathers more and more followers. Alibaba has no inventory, and Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. But they're all in everybody's network, everybody is using them, and therefore we have a problem that we are doing massive transactions with people who are globally recognized entity, but they are non-state actors. And how do you have them adhere to our rules of the game?
That is what this overall innovation share economy is. So where the value you create out of moving the asset than owning the asset, right? So that is how the this internet economy, digital economy brings you to you, and and then when you are trying to do that, you can do that at a global scale, and that's why any business that you have in your mind, it can scale to the global level. It's not only all the foreign brands comes to India, but some of our Indian company like Ola had opened office in Australia. They are also trying to go in Singapore. Some of our payment companies are going to other countries as well. So the play here is a global play. Anybody has any innovative solution, and they can create a platform which can aggregate many experiences, and they can go to global level without much of the investment, with a very innovative idea and with a kind of global infrastructure and capability available from cloud computing and many of the platformation of technology. So this play is available for any small companies out of India as well. So then there will be always a challenge, means like being a India which has been able to provide the services to the global 70 plus country, we have a lot of new companies which can provide those kind of technology solutions. So we would also face this kind of problem in other geographies. Suppose we are seeing this problem from other companies coming to India. So one of the important part in all of this thing is in privacy legislation, they try to evolve extraterritorial jurisdictional limitations, or the extending the boundaries of the privacy legislative enforcement basically. And our data protection regulation has tried to look at what experimentation across globe people have been trying to look at, and try to make them in a way liable to the data that they process at other part of the globe, and they are providing services, goods and services to India in Indian continent.
Okay, so that's very comprehensive, but Mr. Lodha, once again, the average cost of data breach in this country rose to 8% year on year, from 11.9 crore to $1.7 million. And according to a study conducted by IBM Security, this data breach cost is going to go up and up. Do you see the legal framework benefiting from this data breaches, or are you going to allow them to actually counter these data breaches?
The intention is always to counter. The fact that you mentioned the Ubers and the Olas of the world, it is very clear that the technology is assisting the day-to-day functioning of a human. So the positives are there. What this law tries to do is, at the same time, respect the privacy of the individual. And that's what the law's intention is. It's just the manner in which they are addressing it, like the criminal liability, that seems to be extremely excessive. When you have a compensation, you have something like a penal monetary penalty. That should be enough.
Okay. So lots of good answers here, and quite clearly data breaches and data security is really the challenge of the day, and it will be the challenge for the coming years and the decades. So, Mr. Khaitan, there are a lot of challenges, as we've seen. both from the number of users that are there and the government having to try to take into account all kinds of issues that are coming up. This has become an beyond our boundaries kind of issues. Those legislations are also being thought through. But in terms of legal solutions, what next steps forward would you suggest should be adequate, looking a bit into the future for data protection norms?
Well, actually, you see, it's very difficult for law to keep pace with technical changes. It has happened in the past also. For example, we had that old Indian Telegraph Act, which they did not amend, even though email came, fax came, and all those new instruments came into force. And today, your technology changes almost every month. And to expect the Indian Parliament or any parliament in the world to keep changing the law, to keep pace with this technology, is going to be a huge demand. So I don't even blame it for it. And now let's take a situation where data breach, which is protected by the Indian law, is committed somewhere in Africa. And he misuses it from there, either for defamation or blackmailing or some other process. Now, how do you protect it? Unless you have a very strong understanding with that government, or you have a very strong legal system understanding with that government. Since we are living in a globalized world and almost a borderless world, I don't think legislation will be strong enough to commit these kind of things unless you say that, look, I am going to catch only the serious breaches or the big guys, whether it's Facebook or whatever. But then you need the strength of a European Union or an American government to get hold of them. There, as you know, EU has given penalties worth billions of dollars. America does it. I don't see the Indian courts doing it, because here you can't even have a product liability case. What to speak of these cases? And once you start enforcing it through the Indian legal system, we know how much time is going to take.
Okay, can we have, Nirupam, a kind of a model which the internationally agreed norms become enforceable in India also? I'll give you an example. There is law of navigation in the seas, which has been accepted by almost all countries. And that issue keeps coming up when, say, China moves too deeply into the South China Sea, or we have other countries that disrupt the free flow of trade. Now, since this is extra beyond our borders, extra initiatives that are being incorporated, can we all look at pushing for an international consensus that will apply to Indians who go and reside in Africa and still create problems for the world?
That is the possible solution. It takes time to get that kind of a solution. It's happened in other spheres of laws. So there are international treaties wherein you set the basic benchmark of protection and the basic benchmark of, say, penalties and offenses, like in the field of, I'm an intellectual property lawyer as well. So intellectual property, there's the WTO Treaty of TRIPS, which says the basic benchmarks, and all members of TRIPS are required to follow it. A model like that could be followed. It would take a consensus, but I think the whole world right now sees the need for a data privacy law. India sees the need because Europe has the GDPR. We need to be online with that. And therefore, that is a possible solution. It is a time-consuming one, but a possible one, absolutely.
Okay. And Mr. Godse, you know, we tend to put all security breaches, even if somebody takes away my credit card number or Aadhaar number, whatever, as a national security concern. I mean, this is more like how Pakistan would cover everything under national security, from the safety of their prime minister to probably somebody trying to get hold of designs of an airfield or something which is completely a privately used airfield. But really what the problem is that data security and privacy have been a matter of concern in India. But really what we need to do is, do we need to have some kind of acceptance of our capacities on how much we can handle as part of a government-centric national security initiative, and how much we need to incorporate every citizen and every industry and every company in helping us all feel safer and secure.
Yeah. So there have been always different models that people try to experiment in enforcement of or governance of privacy. For example, EU is more government responsible to enforce privacy because privacy is a fundamental right there, and US was more market way of doing thing, and increasingly the GDPR also recognized that we need to have very broader decentralized way of governing the privacy. So it allowed some kind of a self-regulatory mechanism of industry bodies or industry group to govern the privacy, and our data protection regulation had dwell upon all of those kind of possibilities as well, because there are millions of organizations collecting information, right, and governing millions of them from one central authority will be very difficult from the enforcement government side. So there have been a lot of those new instruments which has been in discussion and in practice basically, which helps you to decentralize the governance of privacy. And but at the same time, you need to also understand that last year Supreme Court awarded privacy as a fundamental right. That underline that particular thing. It was there in the constitution, but underlining happened last year. So that's why you need to have very competent kind of enforcement mechanism for privacy. But while doing so, you can do it a very progressive, lean way and very decentralized way as well. And I think that happens, then it will not put a lot of burden on the industry. So our concern is from the industry side, if you have very strong centralized way of governing thing, it may create an issue for small companies especially, and even for larger companies as well.
In fact, Nirupam, that is something that the industry really faces the biggest dilemma. That, you know, one of the reasons why the world has progressed so quickly is because we've given people the freedom of space to think and innovate and implement. I mean, not we, I'm saying mankind has given that. And so therefore, would you, I mean, hand on heart, say that what Mr. Godse has said is the best model, or giving freedom as against protecting data and protecting overall everyone's security and safety, we have to make a devil's choice? And how do you make it?
I believe it has to be a it has to be a balance between providing these benefits at the same time securing the data principal's rights. So the data principal needs to be at the center of it, there's no doubt about it. But if he is availing certain services or goods, and if he makes an informed choice, that should be the end of it. There should be various ways of companies and government using it for legitimate purposes as well. So it needs to be a law which allows for the development of the industry, at the same time protecting the individual rights, is what I feel.
Last question to you, Mr. Khaitan. India is bigger than the European Union in terms of number of people, number of users of appliances and software related things. Can we at least look at having laws as stringent as the European Union, or is that model against the grain of what modern Indian thinking is?
Well, I would prefer that if government invites a public debate and you have thinkers from all over, including from the police and the crime detection, from psychologists, from the school teachers, etc., because this is an issue which is going to gain great importance in the times to come. For example, most school children have mobile phone. God forbid if some of the kidnapper or the wrong people get an idea about the movement of each school child and the timings and when he is likely to be more alone. You know, we are looking at a very, very frightening prospects of, for example, when the maid takes out the children to the park, for example. Now, these are areas which a person with the wrong intentions can pick up very, very fast. So these are areas where we have to protect. We got no choice. When we talk of freedom, let's not forget, the freedom starts from an individual. It is not freedom of the multinational corporation. It's the freedom and safety of the individuals which is important, and the corporations must also respect it. So I think we require a huge debate on this, and there is no harm if you also speak to the lawmakers in European Union and other countries, so that, you know, we can think internationally, because that's the only way forward.
But a debate which should be time bound?
You see, this is an aspect which is going to keep changing, because the technology will keep changing. So you cannot have a kind of a wall where you stop growing. So you have to take a call today, which will be valid till the technology forces you to think again. So I think it has to be an ongoing process.
Right. So quite clearly, as far as the government is concerned, it has many challenges in front of it. I think the first and most important challenge for the government is to create a team of experts and technocrats who will come up with models and terms of references that could be used under almost all the kind of options that are doing the rounds these days, and also keep a little flexibility on how we should come up with a legislation which will see us through for at least the next 10 or 20 years, and then it will build into it the possibility of amending very quickly as and when the situation changes, and it shouldn't be carved in letters of stone that we look at it 100 years down the line. Thank you very much for being with us. I'm again much enlightened with everything that you've said. I'm sure our viewers would also be. Quite clearly, data protection and the security of data related information is important to individuals, to countries, and to the international community. And most importantly, it is something that India needs to address because we have such a large user base. And I hope you enjoyed watching the show. We'll be back next week with another episode. Until then, goodbye.